If you haven't heard of MCP, you're already behind. This is the protocol that could reshape how we build, connect, and automate. Welcome to my user group tonight entitled Beyond the API, MCP, and the Death of Integration Hell. Now the title, a little bit of clickbait to be honest. Integration hell is probably still a bit of a thing, but I am talking a lot about MCP and a lot of other agentic AI stuff as well. Who here has used an MCP server? Limited adoption, interesting. Okay, well hopefully after tonight, you'll be interested in doing it yourself. Hopefully I'm going to convince you that it's definitely worth at least thinking about. So, let me introduce myself. My name is Calum Simpson, SSW VP of AI. Now, you can find my person profile there, by the way, but you might be wondering, what is a VP of AI? Basically, 3 different main responsibilities here at SSW. Firstly, looking after all of our AI-related clients. So we've got a couple of AI clients on the go at the moment, a few more opportunities coming in, obviously a very sort of hot topic nowadays. Also our internal projects, we've got SSW Eagle Eye and SSW Yak Shaver. I'll talk about them a little bit more later on tonight. And also the third main responsibility is using AI for development. So I mean, you might have heard of things like vibe coding, I'm sure. Vibe coding is sort of a little bit frowned upon at SSW, but definitely using AI for development is much encouraged. And I'll explain what the distinction between those two is a little bit later as well. Now, my favorite model, we heard about it in the news just then, Kimi K2. I've been playing around with that a lot recently. It only just came out. If you asked me my favorite model last week, probably would have said Opus 4. I did give Grok 4 a go, but I found it sort of deferred to Elon Musk's opinions a little bit too much. And no matter what you think of Elon Musk, the fact that it sort of looks up what he said before answering a question is kind of weird. So hopefully they'll iron out those issues, although it does do very well in the benchmarks. Yes, now one of the reasons I'm really interested in AI, I believe strongly in working smarter, not harder. And I think AI really enables you to work smarter and not harder, because you can still be in charge of what's happening, but you can offload a lot of the stuff that you already know what to do or know how to do it to an AI assistant to basically enable you to do it. Also, you can use AI to learn. I think it's really awesome in terms of sort of teaching you how to do something as well. I'll talk more on that a little bit later tonight as well. And yes, generally, I spend most of my time working with AI and/or on AI projects. So, getting into the talk tonight, we're going to start it off with a bit of agentic history. I think it's very important to sort of consider how we got to where we are now in terms of MCP and in terms of agents and AI in general. Then I'm going to introduce MCP. What is it? Why is it a thing? Why is it worth knowing about? Then I'm going to talk about using MCP for non-development tasks. So that would be Scrum mastering amongst other things. I'll talk about that later. Then I've got a bit of an intermission from the MCP stuff, 3 thoughts on surviving AI. Then I'm going to show you a custom MCP host that I've created. A lot of people are talking about custom MCP servers, but this is actually a custom MCP host that I've created as sort of a proof of concept for you. And then we're going to wrap it up with a conclusion. So first things first, here is a QR code, which you can use to download the SSW app. And you can use that app to get SSW points. And then you can use those points to earn prizes and rewards. So that is, that's a whole sort of sub-economy. Obviously, Bitcoin's reaching all-time highs at the moment, but SSW points are also worth collecting. Not that they're a cryptocurrency. Anyway, so yes, if everyone has scanned that, we'll carry on. I'll just pause there so everyone can scan it. How are we doing in the comments? I see someone's complaining about Grok 4 and Elon Musk as well. There you go. All right, cool. I will carry on if everyone has that. So I want to introduce agentic history to you. So in the beginning, a long time before MCP, by a long time I mean about 2 years, there was just text, right? It feels like ancient history now, but obviously it wasn't actually that long ago, it was only 2 years. So how did we create agents back before we had MCP or any of that sort of stuff? Well, I actually did a video on the on SSW TV about it. I won't play the video because it's all completely obsolete now, but I will draw reference to one particular moment in that video. You can see me, I used to have a bit more of a beard and a bit more weight, but I want to zoom in on this particular part of it here. So the way that we created agents back then, when all we had was a large language model that output text, was we would sort of give it in text a list of tools that the agent can call, and then we would tell it the input information, this is a situation, these are the tools you can use, and then the LLM would output, okay, I want to use this tool and I want to use these parameters with that tool. And that's basically all we could do to get a large language model to do something. And then what we would have to do is intercept that text. You can see here in this example, it was a home automation system. So I've said, okay, what action would you like to take? You can set the temperature on the thermostat. You can open the window, close the window, or send a message to the owner. And here's the current situation. So that would be sort of sensor data based on thermostats or thermometers in the home. And then it would do something like, message the owner with a thing that says, hey, the current temperature is this. Do you want me to open the window to cool it down? Stuff like that. And then what we would have to do is have some code that interprets that text response and then goes and does an action. And obviously that's prone to issues because if it sent a bit of text that happened to match up with one of those tools, but it wasn't actually trying to use it, you would have to try and figure out, does it actually want to use this tool or not? So obviously that really sucked, and it wasn't a real solution. That was just sort of the only way you could do it. But the good news is soon after that, in June 2023, we got function calling. So this was a big change in the world of agents, because what function calling enabled us to do was, instead of returning text, like, hey, I want to open the window, for example, you could actually get it to respond in a different mode. So the new mode is respond with a function call that says open the window. And then we know very easily, okay, if it does that, then we need to run the code that opens the window, right? So function calling was a really big step in terms of agentic stuff. But there was more. So after that, we got custom GPTs in November 2023. Custom GPTs were very exciting when they first came out. Who here has used a custom GPT? No, not as many as I thought. Interesting. So custom GPTs, they were really exciting when they came out. They still are exciting in a way. I think they still do have a use case. Basically, custom GPTs are these things where you can sort of give them a bunch of API endpoints they can call. You describe all of those API endpoints and the parameters, the input parameters, and then it basically like a Swagger file, if you're familiar with that, and then it can decide which API endpoints to call, but it does that sort of in the context of a chat. So you could, as long as you have an API to do something and you can describe it, you could pretty much create any custom GPT to do whatever you want. There was a lot of talk when custom GPTs were first announced about having some sort of, custom GPT economy where they would share ChatGPT premium subscriptions with custom GPTs that people use. That never really went anywhere. But yeah, so that custom GPTs were cool because there were things that allowed you to let ChatGPT host all the agentic stuff for you, and you can just chat to it and get it to do stuff. The next big news in agentic history was November 2024, MCP. And that's obviously why we're here tonight. So MCP was announced. When it was first announced, I honestly didn't think much of it because, I mean, for the reason I just said, like we could already do a lot of this stuff with custom GPTs, right? What's the big deal about MCP? All it does is Model Context Protocol, if you're not sure what it stands for. All it does is it gives you a standardized way to provide an LLM with a set of tools, and then the LLM can sort of query the list of tools when you start a chat and then use the tools as it goes. So in isolation, MCP is honestly nothing that exciting, nothing that groundbreaking. It just does agentic stuff the same way we always have. But the crucial, important thing, I think the most important MCP-related announcement wasn't actually the conception of MCP. I think it came here, this Sam Altman tweet on the 27th of March this year. And this was Sam Altman from OpenAI basically saying, hey, we are now also supporting MCP. Because I think what really gives MCP power is the fact that everyone is using the same protocol. So in the same way that USB-C, that plug that you can sort of plug anything into the same ports, in the same way, if you can take MCP servers and plug them into any MCP host, that's where the power is, because you don't need to write all these different adapters for all these different formats. Everyone's doing the same thing, which means it's extremely versatile and useful. So that's what I think is the most important thing about MCP, the fact that everyone is actually using it. And indeed, shortly after that, we got this announcement from Microsoft. So they came on board a couple of weeks after that. And I'd say basically it's sort of taken over everywhere. Here's even Alibaba Group in China. They're like fully on board with MCP as well. And indeed, they have a very useful, in my experience, MCP resource that I think is often overlooked by us here in Australia and in the Western world, because it is a Chinese website, but I will show you this anyway. It does have an English translation, so don't worry. But yeah, so this modelscope.cn is a very cool MCP resource. I've been looking around here for all sorts of things. They've got sort of a listing of almost 5,000 MCPs, obviously all the well-known ones, plus a bunch of Chinese ones. I'm sure they're well-known in China, but they were new to me. And yeah, they've got heaps of cool tutorials and other information, GitHub repos, so on and so forth. So I definitely suggest checking that out if you're interested. They also have this hosted ability. So they actually let you create a hosted MCP. Bit of a typo there. But yeah, so they let you create a hosted MCP that you can sort of just sort of copy paste the server config and put it into your own MCP host. I'll get into the details of how you do that a little bit later, but yeah, so you can use this to sort of host servers for you if you don't want to run them locally. So yeah, definitely worth checking that out. It's a little bit like Hugging Face, if you've heard of Hugging Face, but obviously in China. It has a lot more of a focus on MCP though, which is why I'm calling it out for this talk. And yeah, like I said, free hosted MCP servers. The only thing I would caution, if you're using an MCP server that requires credentials, like the GitHub MCP, if you want to host it on model scope, you need to give them your credentials. So I don't know. I'm not sure if I'd trust them or trust anyone with a GitHub personal access token. So just a warning with that. And yeah, there's the screenshot. Now, another note, speaking of Chinese AI things, Claude Code. Now, I'm going to relate this back to Chinese AI in a minute, but who here has heard of Claude Code? And I imagine even less have used it. But Claude Code is a really cool agentic AI. Well, it's basically a CLI, like Gemini CLI. You might have heard of them as well. But basically, you can see here the interface. It's a command line interface. You just type in what you want to do. Here's an example on the screen. I've just said, explain what the app does, and then it sort of analyzes the files in the app and gives a response. You can also connect it up to MCP. So here I connected it up to GitHub MCP, and it was able to search. I asked it, what GitHub issues do we have? This is in Yakshaver, about supporting other platforms like Jira. And then it's able to look up. Obviously, it failed there. It failed because it used the wrong repo name, but then it corrected itself. So that's one of the things you'll see a lot with MCP hosts is they might try to use a tool, get an error, and then self-correct and use it properly. And then it was able to get a bunch of issues that we've got about Yakshaver and Jira. But the reason why I want to talk about Claude Code specifically, it's an awesome tool to use with or instead of Cursor. I was a big Cursor fan. I still am in a lot of ways, but I've been using Claude Code more and more. One of the issues I have with Claude Code though is there's a limited usage. If you buy the Claude $20 a month plan, it does sort of have a limit to how much you can use before it runs out. So that's why I've sort of got both Claude and Cursor, so it can keep going. Like I said, agentic CLI, MCP integration. So it can obviously write and run code itself automatically out of the box, but it can also connect up to MCP servers. So you can basically do anything else as well. And obviously I'll talk more about MCP in a second. But the reason why I'm bringing it up is you can use Kimi K2, the new model that is out, that's my favorite model, in Claude Code today. And you can save a lot of money. Like I said, this $20 Anthropic subscription to use Claude Code is cool, but it does have a limit. You can actually point Claude Code at Kimi K2 and get it to use that as its model rather than Anthropic. And then instead of paying Anthropic, you're paying Kimi K2 or Moonshot.ai is the guys who made it. It might be slow at the moment. Jake tried it out earlier this evening as a guinea pig. It was a bit slow for him, but I was using it yesterday. It was working fine. So your results may vary. Why would you want to use Kimi K2? You're probably wondering. Well, here's some pricing comparisons. Opus 4 output tokens, $75 per million tokens. Sonnet 4, $15 per million tokens. Fairly expensive. Kimi K2, on the other hand, $2.50 per million tokens. So it's a sort of a fraction of the price. There's a price summary you can see compared to all the other sort of leading models. It's way cheaper. And the other interesting thing about it is it's sort of been optimized to use tools to sort of operate in an agentic fashion. So a lot of its training data has been sort of geared towards tool use, which is unlike a lot of the other leading large language models. You can see here on the benchmarks, it's basically neck and neck with Anthropic. It's beating it in some benchmarks, coming second in other benchmarks, but it's pretty much up there. So if you can get that sort of performance for a fraction of the price, why not? So here's how you can use it in Claude Code. Basically, you go to platform.moonshot.ai/console. You can buy some credits. The minimum amount is $10 US. You create an API key, install Claude Code, and then you just run this command. I guess if you're watching this, you can pause on this frame and copy it. But basically, we're just setting the base URL to moonshot.ai/Anthropic, and we're setting the auth token to the Moonshot API key. And then instead of Claude Code using Anthropic's API, it's using the Moonshot API using Kimi K2 in the background. So you're getting that cool performance, the cheap price, but with the same interface, which I think is really cool. And I've been using that a lot. Anyway, I think that's enough random introductory topics. Let's get on to what we're all here for, which is MCP. So first off, I want to just sort of introduce what are the parts of MCP, because this is something a lot of people are a little bit confused about. And I don't blame them because the naming it can be a little bit confusing. But in MCP, we've basically got three main entities. we've got a host, a client, and a server. So the host is sort of the application that you're using that is sort of orchestrating the MCP process. For example, Claude Desktop, Claude Code, the thing I was just showing you, or Cursor, VS Code with GitHub Copilot. All these things are hosts, okay? And then what you do is you add to your host some configuration for each MCP server you want to add. So each MCP server configuration is basically a small set of instructions that say, for example, GitHub, here's how you use the GitHub tools. You run this one-liner command, and then you put that configuration in the MCP host configuration. Then when you talk to your MCP host, for example, Claude Code, and you ask it to do something in GitHub, what it does in the background is it runs that little command, it queries the GitHub MCP server, what tools have you got available for me? And then based on the input that you sent it, it's going to decide which tool it wants to use and run the code via the client. So a lot of people would say like, okay, Claude Desktop is the client and GitHub is the server. But it's actually not quite the case. Claude Desktop is the host. The host maintains a one-to-one copy of a client for each server. And then the server is the thing that actually does the work. So basically you can sort of ignore the fact that the client even exists. Just think about hosts and servers. The client is something that happens in the background. You don't really need to know about it unless you're implementing something yourself. But yeah, so I guess like I've already covered, MCP is really nothing new conceptually. Conceptually speaking, back in my video that I showed you from a couple of years ago, all we were doing was saying, hey, LLM, here's a list of tools you can use. Here's what I want you to do. Please use the tools to do what I want, right? We're basically not doing anything differently to that. The only main difference is we load the list of tools dynamically rather than hard coding them into the system. That's basically the only difference with MCP and doing it the old-fashioned way from 2 years ago. But yeah, so it's nothing really new conceptually, but crucially, if everyone agrees to use it, it enables a sort of a universal plug and play, which is really, really easy and convenient. And by the end of tonight, you'll see why I'm sort of asserting that this is the end of integration hell, because integration changes from writing a bunch of custom code to integrate with a third party to just plugging in an MCP server into that sort of universal USB slot or whatever other combination of MCP servers you might want to do, and that's all you have to do. So yeah, here's an oversimplified demonstration just to drive it home here. So I'm calling back to that video that I showed you before. Basically, what we're doing here, we're taking that hard-coded list of tools and we're replacing that. So this is what MCP does. It provides a dynamic list of tools rather than a hard-coded list of tools. And that dynamic list of tools is going to be based on the MCP configuration. So in your host, you can say, all right, I want you to use GitHub. I want you to use the file system. I want you to use Google Search. I want you to use any other custom MCP server or whatever. You tell it the servers, but you don't tell it the tools. When it runs, it queries each of those servers, gets the lists of tools, combines them together, provides it to the LLM. Then when you chat to the LLM or you send it a message, it decides to use a tool. It routes the request through the client to the server. The server runs the code. Now an MCP server can be running locally or it can be remote. And then the response is returned. And that's pretty much it. And then obviously that can happen over and over again as you have a conversation. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So there's nothing really new going on here. It's not that crazy. I guess the main power of it is the fact that the tools are dynamic and the person who is running the host can determine what tools they want to provide to the large language model, rather than the person who created the app having to sort of hard code them into the system. So yeah, I already touched on this, but I'll just quickly remind you again. So MCP host, things like Claude Desktop, Claude Code that I already showed you, Gemini CLI, Cursor, VS Code, GitHub Copilot, or a custom app. And that's going to be something that I'll show you later on this evening, is implementing your own MCP host. So there's a lot of information out there at the moment about implementing an MCP server, but I think just as interesting is implementing an MCP host, which is basically using or orchestrating MCP servers to achieve goals. But more on that later. MCP servers, on the other hand, these are the sort of the tools that can do things, right? So there's a whole heap of MCP servers out there. I showed you that modelscope.cn site where you can see, a list of 4,000 that you can, go ahead and search for whatever you want. But basically, there's sort of, too many to mention really. One interesting thing here is often you can use the same MCP server in different ways, because when you set your configuration, you can sort of provide different environment variables or different parameters. So for example, there's a file system MCP. You might configure it to a certain directory. If you want to have two file system MCP servers, you could configure them to point at different directories, and then they're used sort of independently of each other. So you can have multiple MCPs that are the same server, but with different configuration. There's other stuff, Brave Search, GitHub integration is a really cool one. SQL databases, obviously, so it can sort of write its own queries, query a database, get results back. Memory store, sort of like how ChatGPT can store memories about your chats, it can do the same thing. Puppeteer, if you want to, Playwright, Puppeteer, if you want to sort of control a browser window. Tavily as well, another search one. These are just a few of my favorites, but there's obviously a whole lot more. So basically, this is why MCP sort of leads us away from integration hell and towards integration heaven. And that's because if you want to integrate with a third-party system, instead of writing code to do it, all you have to do is add some details to a configuration. If required, you may need to add, obviously, an API key or other parameters to set it up. And that's it. That's pretty much all you have to do to enable that LLM to integrate with the MCP servers of your choice, which is really cool. And so basically the way I like to think about it is MCP is moving integrations out of code and into tokens, right? So now instead of writing a bunch of complex integration stuff, we're just letting the LLM decide how and when to use tools in the way it deems necessary to achieve the goal. And the only work we have to do is tell it which tools we want it to use. That's pretty much it. Here's a very basic example. If you want to, if you haven't used it before, you're interested in what it looks like. Here's an example in Claude Desktop, which is a cool MCP host. I've basically connected it up so it can talk to GitHub, and I've just asked it, check the SSW Yakshaver backlog and give me 3 recently closed issues. And so you can see at the top there it says list issues. So it's using the GitHub MCP server. It's using the tool called list issues. It's drafted its own, or it's written its own query or its own parameters in that list issues. So it has probably set the parameters such that it sort of get the last 3 issues or something like that. And then it's got the result, and then it's presented to me in text. And that's basically all there is to it. All I had to do to set that up was to add the MCP server for GitHub to my config, and that was it. Now I can chat to GitHub. This is reading from GitHub, but I can obviously also write to GitHub as well. I could say, hey, add a new issue for whatever reason, and I could get it to draft its own acceptance criteria and description and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, so it's pretty cool. Yeah, and here's another way to think about it if you're more of a visual person like me. So this is the old way of integrating. So you can see there's a third-party API, on the right, and our app is on the left, and we want to integrate our app with the third-party API. So without MCP, what we need to do is basically write a bunch of code. That's what the sort of the spaghetti mass of blue wires is representing. We need to write a bunch of code to connect up to each one of those API endpoints in order to do stuff. Then we need to manage inside our app all the logic to know when do we call each of these various API endpoints, how do we map the data that it returns back to our own domain objects and all that sort of stuff. And basically we need to implement that once per client. So you can imagine if we had another app that we wanted to integrate with the same API endpoint, what would we have to do? We'd have to actually copy all that logic again, right? Because we're integrating a different app to the same API. It's going to be a completely different integration. I'm sure there'll be a lot of copy and pasting you could do, but it's going to have to be another set of code that integrates with the same API. Even if you write a sort of an API integration layer or something, you still need to use that in your code. So somewhere there's going to have to be some code that integrates with the API somewhere. On the other hand, with MCP, this is what the new world looks like. You can see the spaghetti of wires still exists, but crucially it exists in between the MCP server and the third-party API. And the connection between our app and the MCP server is no longer a mass of complex wires. It's now just a single, maybe think of it as a USB-C plug that is plugged into the MCP server. So basically what's happening here is the work of integrating with the third-party API, instead of being implemented once per client, it's being implemented once per server instead. So this third-party API has its own MCP server, and then any app that wants to integrate with the third-party API just plugs into that server. And then assuming the server has been implemented by the same people who run the API, they're obviously going to keep it up to date for you. You don't need to worry about it. If there are new tools that become available, they'll automatically be available in the MCP server. So we don't have to do any work on our end. All we need to do is maintain that configuration that contains our authentication or whatever other necessary things are required. But definitely no complex code required to integrate. And I think that really explains why you want to be thinking about MCP. Because it's a simple setup. All the hard work of integrating has already been done for you, either by a first party, the people who own the API, or by a third party, some random other person has just created a custom MCP server for you. Either way, or you could obviously create your own MCP server. It's not that hard. You only need to do it once though for each API, and then you can use it anywhere. Other cool thing, it's sort of bring your own configuration. So a lot of, if you're writing like a custom app that you wanted to integrate to GitHub, for example, you would need everyone who uses your app to store some credentials somewhere so that your backend that calls the GitHub API is able to use those credentials to perform actions on their behalf in GitHub. But with MCP, if they're running a GitHub server locally on their own machine, there is no longer a need to handle those credentials outside of their machine. So they can configure an MCP host on their own machine, connect it up to GitHub. All the messages to the GitHub API are actually coming directly from their machine. You no longer need to worry about handling those credentials. So it's a lot simpler in that regard. Obviously, you still need to be careful with credentials. I wouldn't be blindly trusting basically any third-party MCP server, because unless you actually look at the code and see what's in there, they could be doing anything, right? They could be harvesting your credentials and then sending it off somewhere else. You've got no way of knowing unless you check the source code. So definitely be careful with third-party MCP servers. I think generally speaking, you can probably trust the first-party ones because the people who you're sending the credentials to are the same people who own the API. So they already know your credentials anyway, potentially. So yeah, but I'll definitely be a little bit cautious about third-party MCPs. And yes, flexible and extensible by design. And I mean that in a couple of ways. The first one I already touched on being if the API updates and the MCP server updates, your app is automatically going to get access to the new endpoints or the new parameters or whatever the difference is in your update without having to do anything. Because the only difference is what message gets sent to the large language model when it decides what tool to use. There's no code change required at all. It's completely dynamic, right? So if there's an update, you don't have to do anything at all. All you have to do is have someone else update your MCP server. Once that's done, you'll have the latest API usage right away. And the other thing that I think is really cool about MCP is mixing and matching combinations. So obviously, having one MCP server is cool, but there's often sort of tasks or workflows where you can combine two different MCP servers together in order to sort of tie a whole workflow together with a single message. And I'll show you some examples of that later on tonight. But I think that's sort of cool. It's sort of like emergent functionality. When I say that, what I mean is something that the person who created the MCP server didn't have in mind, but you as an end user can say, hey, if I use that MCP server and that MCP server and use them together in a certain way, I can actually achieve something that's sort of greater than the sum of its parts. But yeah, I'll show you some examples of what I mean by that a little bit later. And that's it. So that's what and why to use MCP. Hopefully everyone is at least curious about MCP now and is going to try it out later. I want to get into some use cases for MCP. You're probably already thinking of a few. Basically, the way I like to think about it is if you can think of it, you can do it with MCP. There is a little asterisk there. If you can't do it, maybe try again in a couple of months, or write your own MCP server to do it. Basically, as long as it's achievable by code, and that code can be run by a machine, you should theoretically be able to write an MCP server to do it. And if you can do that, then you can do it with MCP. And you can integrate it into any MCP host system and start orchestrating tasks that use those tools. Now, obviously, as developers, we're on the forefront of MCP usage, but some things you can do with MCP, obviously developing apps, a lot of these sort of cursor and all that sort of thing, they have built-in tools to write code to files, to edit code, all that sort of stuff. That's all pretty old news by now. Databases, you might want to connect up to a database so you can query. If you're working on a bug, for example, maybe you want to figure out, hey, this bug happened with this user, query the database and figure out what happened with them, then maybe write a unit test so that issue doesn't happen again. If you've got a database MCP server, you can sort of automate that whole process. So as part of writing code, you can actually look up in the database, see what happened, and then use that information to write better code for you so that same bug won't happen again in the future, for example. GitHub, I've talked about that a little bit a few times already, but obviously integrating with GitHub lets you read GitHub issues, create GitHub pull requests, obviously create branches and all that sort of stuff, commit files, so on and so forth. So that's really cool. You could, for example, connect up Cursor to GitHub and then say, hey, work on issue 1, 2, 3 for me, draft a pull request, and I'll get back to you after my coffee. That's all you have to tell it to do, and then it's going to use the right tools to pull the information out of that issue, plan what it needs to do, write the code, and give you a draft, I guess. So yeah, that's cool. Browser automation is another cool use case. So if you're writing like a front-end app and you want to maybe get it to try and reproduce a bug that's occurring in the front end. You could use Puppeteer or Playwright to get it to open up a browser window, maybe click on the various buttons. The browser automation MCP servers have tools to read the web page, click on elements on the web page, all that sort of stuff. So it could sort of navigate its way through a web page and then reproduce a bug for you. Maybe in the not too distant future, automated browser testing will just be done through MCP servers. You'll just give it a goal like, hey, go to my website and confirm you can make an order or something. And then the MCP server could spin it up with the browser automation, confirm it can do it, and then pass the test. That's probably the future of front-end testing. Cloud deployment as well. So not too much at the moment, but I think in the not too distant future, things like deploying things to the cloud, maybe instead of writing bicep files or other sort of deployment configuration, we'll just do it as a prompt. So we'll say like, all right, create me a web app with a database and a front end, and then it would use all the tools to spin all that up for you on the cloud, and you don't need to worry about configuring anything. That might be a little bit further off, not sure. But obviously there's a whole lot more as well. Those are just a few examples to get you thinking. I'm sure you can come up with a few other ideas. But I think more interesting than that is the non-development MCP use cases, because non-developers, I think they're sort of pretty far behind in terms of using MCPs, because you do need to do some scary stuff with JSON objects in order to get it to work. A little bit of a hurdle. It's really not that hard if you've got someone to show you how to do it. But I do think in the coming months, probably not years, that's too long. In the coming months, it is going to become a lot more common to have non-developers who have no idea what's happening in the background with MCP, connecting up to servers to do things. So one big obvious one, Scrum mastering. Because it interacts with GitHub a lot, you can use your GitHub MCP to perform tasks for you. I'll tell you some more examples on that in a minute. Booking management. This is something that we're doing here at SSW. Obviously, we are doing consulting for a whole bunch of different clients. A big part of that is booking consultants into jobs for clients. It's a whole big manual process, or it used to be, but Eddie here in the audience has actually created a bookings MCP server. So that sort of integrates with our dynamic system. So in a chat, you can say, hey, book Calum in for client Northwind next week, and then it integrates with Dynamics and creates all the bookings for you. And so then Ulysses, our account manager there, he can just in a chat say, I want to do that booking, and it will happen for him. So that's pretty cool. Troubleshooting. So potentially if you're having an issue trying to use an app, or you're getting an error with the app, I think more and more as we go, apps will actually handle errors by internally checking error logs or other database information, and then maybe consulting an FAQ or a database of frequent problems, and then trying to help the user resolve the problem for them based on its experience of other issues. And then obviously content creation and publishing. That's sort of a boring one, but that's what a lot of people obviously use ChatGPT for, is writing articles and comments and other stuff like that. But yeah, I don't think that's too interesting, etc. I wanted to zoom in on Scrum mastering a little bit, because this is something I've been playing around with a lot in the last couple of months. Things like getting a list of outstanding tasks to chase up. So you can query your backlog and say, hey, which tasks have gone over the estimated effort? And then it can write the query to look that up, look in the current sprint, which tasks are running behind, get a list of them, show them to you, and then you can go chat to each of those people and figure out what's going wrong, is there any blockers, so on and so forth. Drafting descriptions and ACs for unrefined items. So if you've got a bunch of unrefined issues in your backlog that need sort of fleshing out, You can maybe provide information, context about the project, where it's up to currently, all that sort of stuff. And then it can sort of fill out those things for you. I wouldn't just, send it straight in there. You'd probably want to draft it, proofread it, make sure it all makes sense first. But yeah, it's really helpful for that. If you're in a sprint planning, you want to figure out what have we got capacity for this sprint. It can look at the backlog. It can tell, obviously what are the top priority items based on how they've been ordered in the backlog, and then suggest, all right, based on how much work you got through last sprint, I reckon you can do this set of PBIs this sprint. So that can be cool as like a starting point in sprint planning. Checking a backlog for duplicates. So this is a big problem with SSW Yakshaver, which is a tool that allows you to basically record a video and it creates a PBI in a backlog for you based on your video. I'll tell you more about Yakshaver later on, but what it results in is a lot of duplicates in our backlogs. So in other words, two people reporting the same problem. And that ends up with two separate PBIs. And then maybe only one of those PBIs gets worked on, the other one remains outstanding, and we sort of forget about it. So checking a backlog for duplicates is really cool, because then you can sort of combine them together and say these two issues are related. And then when you mark one as done, the other one can be marked as done as well. Grouping items into epics is another big thing. So obviously an epic is sort of like a large piece of work that's made up of a bunch of individual PBIs. So if you've already marked out, these are my 3 epics, when you've got a new feature that you're adding to the backlog, it could sort of automatically select which epic that feature belongs to. And another cool one that I'll actually show you the example that I did just 2 days ago is importing PBIs from a spec review. So at SSW, we have a process called a spec review. Basically, when we've got a new client project, we'll go sit down with them, usually in their office for a couple of days, and we'll talk about what they want out of their project. And we'll sort of write up a big list of all the different bits of work that need to be done in order to achieve their project. And we'll give a big Word document that sort of explains all the different options we considered, the recommended approach to developing, all that sort of stuff. So we'll produce this documentation, but one of the really annoying things about starting a new project is we then need to sort of duplicate all that data entry into the project backlog. So that might be GitHub or it might be Azure DevOps, but it's sort of an annoying process. You need to go copy all those bits of work into individual PBIs, populate them all with descriptions and acceptance criteria and all that sort of stuff. So I thought that's a prime candidate to use MCP servers to fix. So this is what I did a couple of days ago when we started a new client project. I have censored the name of the client to protect their privacy, but you can see what's basically happening here in the uncensored areas. So I provided Claude Desktop, this is, with the Excel spreadsheet that contains all the work items that we suggest need to be done to achieve the project, and the Word document that basically contains all of our reasoning, all of our recommendations, all the work that needs to be done. And then I've just said in the prompt, here's the Excel spreadsheet and document. I need to import the items from the spreadsheet into Azure DevOps, do all the research, prepare data. Don't actually create anything because I want it to draft all the stuff it's going to do first so I can double check it. And then it's going to do it all for me. And that's all I had to tell it to do, right? So then here it's produced an overview. So it's created a bunch of epics for me. It's provided the estimated effort for each of those epics and a brief description of each one. It's broken it down into epics and PBIs inside those epics. And here's an example of a couple of them. I won't show you all because it's going to be pretty repetitive, but it's given me a description and a bunch of acceptance criteria for each of those PBIs. And all of that is based on the documentation that we have already provided to the client in the form of the spreadsheet and the Word document. So back in the old days, this would be sort of a couple of hours job of manually going through all those documents and copy pasting or writing up new content to put into the backlog. Now MCP servers do it for me. So it obviously drafted that stuff, and then I had to make a few edits on the drafts where it had misunderstood a couple of things. Then I basically just said, all right, go for it, import the data, and then it did, and that was it. So that's just one small example that I used it for a couple of days ago. I've been using it basically for all my Scrum mastering tasks recently. I find it really cool, and I think it's definitely going to be the way of the future, not just for Scrum mastering, but for pretty much any interaction with any system. Yes, all it needs is a bit more adoption from people, and I think we'll get there as more and more people see how cool it is. So yeah, I guess just to repeat that point a little bit. So you can imagine if you wanted to build this before MCP, what would you have to do? Well, let's say you want to build a custom AI Scrum mastering app. You'll need to take a lot of dev time because you need to obviously build all the integrations with the various backlogs. You want to, all that spaghetti of wires that I showed you earlier, you need to code all that up. Then obviously you need to have developers on hand to sort of maintain and update all those connections. That's probably not viable, right? Maybe if you can on-sell it for enough money, you can recoup your costs and make a profit eventually, but it's a really big undertaking, and it probably doesn't make sense for anyone to try and do it unless they've got plenty of venture capital backing. Another option might be copy-paste details to and from ChatGPT. So this was sort of another option we had before MCP. You could copy-paste all the content of our documents into ChatGPT, get it to give you drafts, but then you still need to copy-paste the information back out of ChatGPT and into each of the individual PBIs. So obviously that still kind of sucks. It is quick and easy, but it's definitely not convenient, right? And so this is where integration hell turns into integration heaven, and that is using an MCP host with plug-and-play config. Because all I had to do to make this automatic backlog import tool was just take Claude Desktop and connect it up to the GitHub MCP server, and that was it. And then I just tell it what I want it to do. So obviously it is quick and easy, it's auto-updating, and you can use that however you want. So I'm sure whoever created the MCP server was not thinking about doing a bulk import from an SSW spec review document into the backlog. But just by prompting it the way I did, it did it for me. So yeah, basically using the tools however you want to use them is one of the really cool things about MCP. Here's another piece of emergent functionality. So here what I wanted to do was Calum, that's me obviously, joining the Yak Shaver team next week. The sprint is from Monday the 21st to Friday the 25th. Check Calum's availability, because obviously sometimes we have days that are booked out to work on clients. Sometimes we have days where we're available to work on internal projects. So check when Calum's available to work on the project, and then check the backlog, find tasks that Calum can do based on his previous tasks he's done in this project, and then suggest a few for the product owner to decide which task to assign to him. So this is an example scenario where you can use, I'm actually combining the GitHub MCP server with the bookings MCP server that Eddie created. So I'm using the bookings MCP server to figure out how many days is Calum available, so I know how much work to give him. Then I'm using the GitHub MCP server to figure out what has Calum previously done and what makes sense to give him based on how much time is available. So that's an example of emergent functionality, because the person who created the bookings MCP server and the person who created the GitHub MCP server definitely weren't thinking about this use case when they did it, but I'm thinking about it when I use it, and I can just combine these two things together to get it done. So here's what happened. So it's detected, all right, Calum's available. This is based on the bookings. Calum's available on Monday. He's not available Tuesday through to Friday. He's got client bookings. So we've got him for one full day in the sprint. Here you can see it's searching a bunch of tools. So it's searching the backlog. What are the open issues that need to be done? What are the closed issues that Calum has previously worked on? So we get an idea of what his speciality or context is all about. And then here's a summary. So okay, he's got limited availability. He's got 1 day. He's previously done work specifically on the vector databases and search functionality, the backend development and indexing systems, and the Yakshaver architecture and processes. So it's going to try and find me tasks related to those. So here it's suggesting some tasks with pros and cons of each one. And then basically I can just take this to the product owner and say, all right, we've got someone join the team for a day next week. Here are the options. Which one makes sense to go with this sprint? And I just thought that was a cool way where you can sort of, and we've got a recommendation here. So that's a cool way that you can sort of combine different MCP servers together. Obviously that's only one idea, but there's sort of infinite different ideas of how you could use this thing to automate processes in your day-to-day life. And yes, so that's it. Now, side note, GitHub MCP only supports GitHub search. And the problem with GitHub search is it only does sort of a substring search rather than a vector search. So vector search being like a semantic search on meaning. So all it can do is check, does this issue contain the text, for example, Jira or database or whatever. It can't search based on meaning. So one of the problems that I had using the GitHub MCP server was trying to use it to find issues in the backlog. Here's an example in Cursor, which is obviously another MCP host. Here I've said, is there anything in the backlog about using a browser extension to access console logs and or network traffic? So just a query. I know there's something in the backlog because I saw it the other day. I can't find it though. So I'm trying to use this agent to help me find the issue. But it doesn't work. Basically 7 MCP tool calls later, here are all the tool calls. So it's trying to try all these different search strings to find the issue. And here's the ultimate result. Based on my search, I found no existing issues in the backlog about the browser extension to access console logs and or network traffic. And I know that's wrong because I put the issue there a couple months ago. I just can't find it now. So I know it's wrong. And so I thought about that problem a little bit and I solved it using a custom MCP server. So I created my own MCP server that does a vector search on GitHub issues. So basically what it does is it creates a local vector database of all the GitHub issues in a repository. You need to sync it up per repository to get started. And then instead of using GitHub search, you can use the vector search instead, which searches based on meaning rather than substrings. So if you are going to try and use MCP servers to do Scrum mastering, I suggest getting something like this. So it uses a Feist database, which is a free, quick and easy local solution. It's a local vector database rather than one that you need to deploy on the cloud. So it's really easy to get up and running. Easy setup, you just run a sync command and then it pulls in all the issues, stores them in the database, and then you just use it by asking your MCP host to look it up. So here's what I said next. I said use the Feist tool to have a look. And then it worked. And my slides mixed up, but yeah, so here's what happened. It used the Feist tool to search for information, and then it found it. So it found the issue when it used the vector search. It did not find the issue when it used the out-of-the-box GitHub search. So I definitely recommend that. And I would suggest to Microsoft that they incorporate this into GitHub, either in the GitHub MCP or the GitHub search or whatever. If you are interested, this repo is publicly available. So if you want to use it out, try it out yourself, feel free. And you can just install it. There's a README that has all the instructions. That's the config that you put in your MCP host. And yeah, that's it. So yeah, if you want to give that a go, feel free. I guess you can pause the video on that frame to get the URL. A quick aside on the FICE pronunciation, because this came up when I was showing someone this presentation. They said, do you pronounce it FACE or FICE? FICE, if you're wondering, by the way, stands for Facebook AI Similarity Search. Is it pronounced FACE or FICE? I looked it up. It turns out there's no agreed upon pronunciation. So either way, I guess is fine. All right, cool. So let's have a break from MCP and just talk about AI in general, because obviously it's a very exciting place. A lot of changes happening every day. Considering AI as a tool, just like any tool, the value of using AI depends on how you use it. Okay, so obviously you can use it to produce AI slop, as some people refer to it as, which is basically just brainlessly copy-pasting stuff into AI, taking whatever it gives you and using it, maybe as an article or a comment or a post or a video. I don't think there's a whole lot of value in using AI like this, because and you probably experience this as well. If you're on social media and you see a post that's got a bunch of M dashes in it, just immediately ignore it, because it's not going to be valuable, right? It's just someone's copy pasted this thing into ChatGPT and pasted the result. Who cares? It's not going to contain any interesting stuff. But by the same token, vibe coding I think is also sort of frowned upon nowadays. But I like to make a distinction between vibe coding and AI-assisted development. So we actually have an SSW rule on this subject that sort of explains the difference between vibe coding and AI-assisted development. Basically, what you want to do when you're using AI to write code for you, instead of just mindlessly, let me zoom in for you. Instead of mindlessly giving it a prompt, getting it to produce code, and then just pushing it straight into the repository and calling it a day, you sort of want to make sure that you are completely across everything that it's doing. And you're not just letting it go ahead and do all sorts of crazy stuff, sort of like this image indicates. So we've got a waterfall method where we build the car tire by tire, and then the frame, and then the finished thing. We've got the agile method, where each one of these is a usable product. It just gains a bit of functionality each time. Then we've got AI method. This is a vibe-coded car, so it's got all sorts of random features that no one asked for, and then you need to sort of refine it back into a proper vehicle that the customer actually wanted, right? So that's exactly what you don't want to be doing when you're using AI. So I'm suggesting you need to make a plan, a step-by-step plan. You need to discuss the plan with the AI to make sure that each of those steps make sense. And then you want to implement that plan one step at a time. And so that way you'll have a small focused change to review before you move on to the next step. Because if you just get it to do everything all at once, the review is going to be massive and you're probably just going to skip over it and not bother. So yeah, I think that is the difference between AI-assisted coding and vibe coding. Is AI-assisted coding, you're still fully aware of everything that you're doing. You're just offloading the actual work to the AI, but you're still reviewing what it does, and you are fully on board with what it's doing before it does it as well. I think if you're using AI as a sort of a personal tutor or a personal assistant, it has a lot of value, and that's what you want to be using AI for primarily. is personal assistance, right? So things that are relevant for you, rather than just some other generic ChatGPT generation. If you ask it to give you a step-by-step plan to implement a custom MCP server, for example, it can do it. You can tell it, hey, I want to create my own bookings, SSW bookings MCP server. Here are all the things that need to be done. It can produce that plan for you. And then when you follow that plan, you're actually going to learn how to do it as well. And I think that's the way you want to be trying to think about it. And I think here's an image to sort of summarize that idea. If you remember, Donald Trump came out and sort of announced tariffs on imports. That's the way I like to think about AI content. Basically, you want to be tariffing imported AI content and supporting locally produced AI content. Hopefully you get the analogy there. So what I'm sort of asserting is locally produced AI content is valuable. If you're producing it for yourself to match your own requirements, that's where the value is. If you're just mindlessly shooting off comments into social media or whatever, it doesn't have a lot of value. So you always want to be trying to maintain an AI trade surplus, basically. And I guess as well, with every interaction, if you aren't gaining something out of it, then someone else probably is. So if you're not learning from your interaction with AI, someone else is probably using your interaction as training data or whatever else, who knows. But you want to be trying to make sure you get something out of it. Next one. So AI capability enhancement. So obviously it's growing rapidly. 3 years ago, using AI to write code, basically non-existent, right? 2 years ago, it had limited value. You could do it, but it often would hallucinate classes that don't exist or methods that don't exist, all that sort of thing. So it had really limited value. You had to spend a lot of work trying to make it work. 1 year ago, decent with some minor imperfections. Now, it's great for most general tasks, in my experience. I think next year, at the rate we're going, it's going to be great for all specialized tasks as well. There's probably only going to be a very small subset of development tasks and things like that it can't do that well. But I think basically just about every specialized task is going to be solvable using AI. And I think in 2 years, manual coding is going to be basically for hobbyists only. It's going to be looked at the same way as maybe maintaining a vintage car. Like it's what some people do on the weekend for fun. But for real enterprise coding, it's going to be AI-assisted development. Now, I don't mean vibe coding. Again, going back to what I was talking about with vibe coding versus AI-assisted development, I don't think vibe coding is anywhere near good enough to take over, and it probably won't be in 2 years. I think it'll still be people developing with AI, but that's the crucial thing. Everyone is going to be developing with AI. Not many people, if anyone, is going to be manually doing it. So given this rapid inflation, if you will, in the capability enhancement of AI, I think what you want to be thinking about is embracing tech debt. Why? Because embracing tech debt today can be paid off with the inflation of AI capabilities tomorrow. If you think about it just like money, debt plus inflation is kind of like a life hack. So imagine if you borrow $1 million to buy a house, and then the next day you get this sort of hyperinflation scenario where the bank's printing $100 trillion notes. Your $1 million loan is still only $1 million. So it's worth now maybe a couple of cents in the new market value of the currency, right? So if we have tech debt that's denominated in today's effort, and today's effort tomorrow is going to be so much smaller, the obvious next step to do is to embrace as much tech debt as possible, right? Because why not? It's going to get paid off easily in a couple of years. You repay a lot less than what you borrowed because it's basically getting inflated away. So yeah, instead of debt, we've got tech debt. Instead of inflation, we've got AI capability enhancement. So basically for product owners, embrace tech debt and bet on rapid AI enhancement, just like that guy. All right, and the third and final point I wanted to mention, the AI skill set. So I think being a good dev with AI is not the same as being a good dev in general. There is obviously plenty of crossover between the two, but there is a different skill set required to be a good dev with AI. And this is basically what it's like developing with AI. We've got Sisyphus pushing his AI prototype up the hill, and he just needs to keep pushing. So the most important AI skill, I believe, is perseverance. Sticking with your goal, taking it all the way to the end and achieving it is the main thing you need. A lot of people sort of try AI and then something goes wrong and then they just give up because it didn't work. I think really you need to just stick with it. You need to make sure you communicate clearly what you want it to do. And yeah, if you stick with it, you're going to achieve it eventually. So ideas are a lot more valuable now. You know, in the past, ideas weren't valuable because, you know, you can have a million ideas, but if you never get them done because they're too hard, well, you're never going to get anywhere. So ideas are not valuable if it's hard to implement. But if you can have, for example, I have a bunch of cursor background agents running at any given time, just implementing random ideas that I had for, hey, that would be a cool idea for a custom MCP server. I just get a background agent to create it for me while I'm at work or while I'm eating dinner, and then I'll check it out later tonight, see what happens. So yeah, I think ideas are a lot more valuable when it's so much easier to implement them. Because implementation is easier. So basically, if you can clearly explain it, then you can probably do it. So I think you need to manifest your vision and don't wait for someone else to do it. If you can think of it right now, just go ahead and do it and persevere with it, just like this guy. So moving on, I want to now talk about the custom MCP host. I have implemented a custom MCP host. The main reason I did it was sort of as a proof of concept because I've seen a lot of people talking about custom MCP servers out there, but not many people talking about custom MCP hosts. So a custom MCP host is obviously something that is sort of orchestrating the MCP servers in order to perform a task or a series of tasks. So the custom MCP host that I created is called TeloScript. I just gave it that name based on the Greek word telos, which means purpose or meaning, and then obviously script, just a name that I brainstormed with AI, obviously. But what I wanted to do with this was create an MCP host that can sort of orchestrate servers that isn't just chat-based, because all of the MCP hosts we've got out there at the moment are chat-based. But I wanted to, for example, have something I could send an API request to, maybe through a webhook, and then have it perform the task it needs to do using MCP servers to handle that webhook, rather than me having to open up Claude Desktop and typing in a message to say, you know, perform that action. I'll show you some examples in a second. My inspirations behind this, Manus. Has anyone here heard of Manus? A couple. Basically, it's sort of a tool. It basically is itself an MCP host that you send a message to, and then it uses a bunch of tools to, you know, research a topic, produce a web page for you, whatever else its tools can do. Sure, I was inspired by that, but I wanted to have something that I could put my own custom tools into and not just rely on the Manus provided tools. And also I wanted to just do something that I was hosting myself and not using this third-party service for. N8N is another inspiration. Has anyone here heard of N8N? Same people, interesting. But basically that's sort of a workflow tool where you can sort of like Power Automate or you know, things like that. You sort of give it a bunch of steps, you tie them together. So after it does that step, it does that step. so on and so forth. So that was sort of what I wanted to do, but I wanted to do that through a prompt rather than through a hard-coded process. And Docker MCP Gateway is another inspiration. I'll explain why in a minute. I won't get into it now. But yeah, so if you want to check it out, this repo is publicly available. Calum.js/TeloScript. Now, obviously, I've just put this as sort of a proof of concept on my own GitHub. If I was implementing this, in an SSW product or whatever, I'd have it in an SSW repo. But it's just here because I created this for the purpose of this user group. Because I thought, going back to AI as a personal tutor, what better way to learn about how MCP works than to create your own MCP host using AI. So yeah, there's a whole README here about how it works, how you can set it up yourself. It also has an MCP server itself. So this thing is an MCP orchestrator, but it's also wrapped inside an MCP server. I'll show you, it might be a little bit confusing. I'll show you what I mean by that in a minute. But basically, you just like with Claude Desktop, Claude Code, all those other hosts, you give it your MCP config. You give it your MCP config, you give it a task, and then it performs the task. It orchestrates the MCP servers to achieve your goal. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So it basically operates just like all those other servers we've seen. The key difference, all these other hosts we've seen. So the key difference is API based. So you can send in API messages rather than having to open up a chat window and type in a chat and press enter. So it could be part of a fully automated process, like reacting to a webhook or whatever else. Obviously, bring your own MCP configuration, easy to set up. It's orchestrating MCP servers. It's self-hosted and free, obviously, because you're hosting it yourself, apart from the tokens. So it still needs to use a large language model to perform tasks. And I think of it more of as an idea than a product, right? I don't think anyone's going to be taking my repo and sort of taking dependency on it. But what I want you to get out of it is open the repo, figure out how it works, and then take that idea to your next integration and implement the same thing. Because it's not that complex at all. I really think it's a sort of a learning opportunity more than anything. And I'll give you a quick demo of it right now. So this is what happens. This is what you get when you run it. Basically, what we've got in here is configuration. So this is where you configure all of your MCP servers. So you can see here, like here's my custom GitHub vector search MCP server sitting here beside the GitHub MCP server and all the other MCP servers that I want to use. If I want to find new ones, I can go back to that model scope website, find an MCP server that I want, and just plug it in here, and then it will unlock additional functionality. And then what I can do is I can go to the orchestration tab, I can give it a goal, I can tick a set of MCP servers I want to use, and then I press orchestrate, and then it's going to basically attempt to achieve that goal using the selected servers. So this obviously is sort of operating in a similar way to Claude Desktop, but the main difference is all this interaction. This is sort of a user interface page, but all this interaction can also happen through the API. And I'll show you that in a sec. But let's do a quick example. So if I say, what is Calum Simpson's talk about tonight? I will give it the MCP server to search the internet, and then I'll click orchestrate. And so now what it's doing is first it's going to query the MCP server that I selected, see what tools are available, decide which tool it wants to use. Here it's using Tavily Search, which is basically like a Google search API. It's getting results. It creates this execution plan for me so I can see what it's doing and where it's up to. There you go. So it looks like it got it completely wrong, but that's okay. It does that sometimes. It worked, for the record, it worked when I had tested it, but it looks like it did not find my talk, but it found a boxing match between Calum Simpson and Ivan Zuko. So hopefully I'm not doing that tonight because I haven't trained for that. But yeah, so that's basically giving you the idea, right? So you give this thing a purpose, you pick what tools you want it to use, you click orchestrate, and then it can run. And you can also send that information in through an API call. So I could send an API message to the endpoint if I deployed this in the cloud or whatever. I could say, here's your purpose, here are the MCP servers I want you to use, go ahead and do it. And then that could be part of an automated process like a webhook or whatever else. So here's what I just showed you. So I won't spend too much time on that. That's the interface, that's what you get. I want to call back to what I showed you right back at the beginning of the presentation, which was how we used to do agents and compare it to what we're doing now. So what I'm doing with my custom MCP host, instead of a chat, there's an incoming API request to trigger the process. Instead of a hard-coded system prompt, it's sort of derived from the goal. So when I type that goal, like what is Calum's talk about tonight, it derives a system prompt out of that goal. It picks which tools to use. So I pick the tools, I send it in through the API. So those tools are defined through the API request. Then after that, the main process is the same as any MCP host. You know, it's using tools. It's saying, are we done yet? If not, do it again, repeat over and over again until that goal is finished, and then return the final response. So I wanted to also demo a slightly more complex scenario. So at SSW, we've got internal projects. Each of those internal projects, we do a weekly sprint review, and we actually record a video and we put it on YouTube. So I thought it would be a really cool idea if we took those weekly YouTube videos and we automatically turned them into blog posts for the products. Because in those videos, we basically talk about all the things that have been done this week, what we're planning to do next week. You know, it's prime content for a blog post. So basically what I wanted to do to sort of test out how good is this MCP orchestration is give it the task of converting a transcript into a blog post via a prompt and a bunch of MCP tools only. So here's what we're doing. We get the YouTube transcript. So I found on that modelscope.cn a YouTube transcript MCP server. Basically, you give it a YouTube video, it returns a transcript. We check existing blogs. So if we've got a local copy of the blog repo, we can just check the files in the blog repo, see how they're formatted, what's the standard way that we write a blog post, because obviously you don't want every blog post to be completely different. You want them to be following a similar sort of format. Then we write a new blog. So we write a new blog, we create that as a file. Then we use GitHub MCP, create a branch, push it in there, create a pull request. So we can do all that just with a simple prompt and a couple of MCP tools. Now, obviously, we can already do this with any MCP host. You could do it with Claude Desktop or whatever, if you configure the right MCP servers. With TeloScript, you can do it as an API request. With TeloScript MCP, you can also bring your config with you. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. But let me show you this quick demo first. So to make this tool more useful, apart from just defining these generic goals and then launching the agent, I also wanted to sort of provide a way to encapsulate goals into endpoints. So I've got these things called purpose endpoints. And basically what you do with these is you indicate what your URL is, and then you sort of hard code the prompt template and the selected MCP tools so that every time a request hits that endpoint, it's going to use that prompt and those tools. And so that way we can very easily just send requests to this TeloScript/purpose/YouTube video to blog endpoint. We don't have to redefine the prompt every time. So it's just a little convenience. But let me show you what it looks like. So I've got my let me zoom in. I've got my terminal here. So all I'm doing with this terminal is I'm sending in to that URL that I just showed you, YouTube video to blog. I'm sending in the URL of the YouTube video that I want to watch, that I want to convert into a blog post. Press enter on that. And that's just going to send off this API request. Obviously, this could be triggered from anywhere, really, a webhook or whatever. And then this is what it created here. So this is now running. While it runs, I will show you what it's doing if I click edit. So this is the only instruction I had to give it. Get the transcript from the provided YouTube video. That's the thing I just sent from the console. Write a blog post about it. Check the existing blog posts in the provided file system folder to understand the style. That's using the file system MCP. And then create a branch in this GitHub repository, push it in there. So that's all I had to do. I just had to type that, and then I had to tick file system, GitHub, YouTube transcript, that custom MCP I mentioned. That's all I have to do in terms of setting this up. And if you've used N8N, you can imagine, you could be doing something similar to that with N8N, but you'd have to sort of define all those blocks and tie them together and that sort of thing. So we can see what it's doing here. We can see the tools as it uses them. Might be easy to see here. So first it got the YouTube transcript. Then it found the directory I was referring to. Then it read multiple files. So that was reading the existing blog posts, deciding what the format is. Then it created a branch in GitHub. Then it wrote a file, so that would have been creating the new blog post. And then I guess it's pushing it to GitHub. And it's probably just about done. Yep, it's done. So it's probably just drafting its final confirmation message for me at the moment. And then it should move over. Sometimes it can take a little while to finish off. While it does that, let's have a look if the branch is... Oh, now it's done. Okay, cool. So if I look in here, it's given me the link to the blog post that it just created. So I can just go ahead and open this up. And here we go. So this blog post here was just created by TeloScript by orchestrating a bunch of different GitHub tools together, the YouTube transcript, the file system, and the GitHub MCP. And this blog post is basically telling you everything that was covered in the video. So we rolled out to our first Yak Shaver customer, which is awesome. It called it Yak instead of Yak Shaver, so maybe still need to edit it a little bit, and so on and so forth. So that's pretty cool. That's a good enough draft, at least, of a blog post based entirely on the YouTube video. And the good thing is it barely took any time at all to do, right? All I had to do was write a prompt. It used Rick, probably because it knew Rick was talking in the video. So it put him as the author of the blog post, which is also cool. But yeah, so all I had to do this was give it that prompt, tick the tools, and I'm done. And that's how easy it is to integrate systems together. And I guess that's the whole point of my talk tonight. Integration hell is dead. And yeah, so here's just a summary, just in case the demo didn't work, but it did, so we can skip through it. Yeah, so the other thing I briefly mentioned earlier, but I actually put this whole MCP orchestration tool itself inside an MCP server. So what you can do with that is sort of trigger one of these TeloScript processes from another tool, like Claude Desktop or whatever. Is that actually a good idea? I'm not sure, but you can do it. All you have to do is put that TeloScript MCP in your configuration, and that's it. And there's a sort of a thing indicating that. So Yeah, I heard you like MCP, so I wrapped an MCP server around your MCP orchestration tool so you can orchestrate orchestrations. I'll let you play around with that yourself, but there's an example. So I'm in Claude Desktop, and I've said, use TeloScript to get the transcript from that, basically do the same thing as I just demonstrated. And what it does here is it's actually created its own TeloScript agent using the MCP server to do that. And yeah, that's pretty cool. So what can you use it for? I'm sure you've already got heaps of ideas about what you could do with this. Here are some random ideas I came up with. So with Dynamics CRM, obviously you can get a webhook whenever a new lead lands in Dynamics. So you could use Google or Tavily or Brave Search or some sort of search engine MCP to find information about that client and company, maybe populate whatever details you find back to your CRM system, find who has the right skills for the job. So if you know what type of lead it is, what tech they're working with, you can figure out which consultants available have those skills and suggest them. Find out who worked on a similar project. So obviously we've got all our client documents in SharePoint. You could be looking that up to find who's worked on a similar thing and suggest that they work on this one. Who's got available upcoming availability using Eddie's booking MCP to see who's got an empty calendar next week or whatever. Maybe even call the client, right? There could be a phone call MCP. I don't think it exists yet, but theoretically there's no reason why you couldn't create one now. I think, with technology like 11 Labs and stuff, you could create a phone call with this phone number, talk about this topic, try and lock in a date and time for a meeting, right? You could probably do that now if you really wanted to. And then book in a meeting as well. So you could sort of do all that sort of stuff right now without too much trouble. Some more stuff. GitHub issues. Obviously, we can listen to GitHub issues listen to the webhooks when GitHub issues are created. So we could be checking the database for extra details. So if someone is complaining about a bug, hey, my order, I got an error when I tried to click purchase on my order. We could be looking up that customer in the database, looking up the order in the database, and trying to just get any information out of the database that either helps us solve it or at least gives context to the person who is going to try and solve it. Checking the logs, obviously, if an error occurred, we could look up the logs, get information from that, post it on the issue and say, here's some useful context that might be handy. Reproduce the issue if it's just a front-end bug, like maybe a button doesn't work. We could have an MCP server listening to the webhook of the GitHub issue creation, spinning up Playwright, navigating to the website, confirming that button works or not. That could be cool. Maybe you could be trying different browsers to see does it work in some browsers and not others, that sort of stuff. Obviously, looking for similar issues. Maybe when you've completed an issue, check, are there any similar issues that someone else complained about the same problem that should now be closed off now that we've done this piece of work. Assigning to epics, I think I already talked about that one. Suggesting a solution. Obviously, GitHub Copilot can already do this. If you assign an issue to GitHub Copilot, it can draft an issue for you, but you could also be doing it yourself. Why not? And suggesting an update to docs or FAQ. So if someone is complaining about something and it turns out it's just maybe a misconfigured product, maybe the MCP server could, or other LLM with MCP server could detect, all right, this problem is actually something that could be solved by the client, but since they've had an issue, we probably need to update our README or our docs or our FAQ so that the next person doesn't have the same issue. So hopefully you've got a whole heap of ideas of what you can do. There's obviously infinite additional ideas that I'm sure you'll come up with on your own time, but really the push of what I'm trying to convey tonight is it's the death of integration hell, because once integration has been solved once by one person implementing an MCP server, it can be used anywhere in an MCP host or in a custom host that's sort of orchestrating MCPs yourself. It's really cool because you can mix and match integrations, so you can sort of get that emergent functionality that no one thought about when they created the MCP server, but you're thinking about as you do it. And really the code that we used to use when integrating has been replaced by plain text instructions. And yeah, so that's sort of the idea behind the talk tonight. So just to wrap it up, I wanted to briefly touch on the SSW AI strategy. So one of our first things we want to do is obviously produce MCP servers to support integrations. So one of our products at SSW, Tina CMS, headless CMS, Git-based, that you can sort of use as a CMS to host your website or host the content of your website. Producing an MCP server for that to make it easy to, for example, update or create new posts, all that sort of stuff. That's obviously something that we want to do. But more interestingly, I think, is we want to be adding webhooks to provide agentic integration points. So this is something we've already done in SSW Eagle Eye. If you're not familiar with SSW Eagle Eye, it's basically an app that analyzes email communications and then sort of tags emails with different things. So you might have a tag, for example, for, hey, this a customer is complaining about a product. So it can sort of highlight that, flag that, and then do whatever you want with it, right? So Eagle Eye is sort of analyzing emails, finding potential issues, or they're not necessarily bad things, they could be good things as well, and then doing things with them. And I think MCP is the perfect way to handle it, because as you've seen, it's so easy to create a workflow by just plugging in integrations with other systems that we could handle all sorts of different patterns or identified emails in different ways. So that's one of the things we've already done, is we've already added webhooks to SSW Eagle Eye. The other big one is SSW Yak Shaver. So if you're not familiar with that, I touched on that at the start of the talk tonight, but basically Yak Shaver is our tool for adding issues to backlogs, issues being either bug reports or feature requests, or sending emails as well. It supports backlog issue creation and email sending. Basically what you do is you record a video of yourself, optionally sharing your screen, and then you'll say, you know, hey, I found a typo on this web page, or hey, I think it'd be really cool if this app did this or that. And then in the background, it uses AI to route that issue to the correct backlog, tag the correct people, because it can look up, you know, who works on this project, who are the stakeholders, and then create the issue in the background. So you can see this little animations happening here. But yeah, so this workflow works really well and it's really cool, but obviously there's a lot of additional functionality we could get without too much effort if we started integrating MCP servers into this as well. Because currently we do have a bit of integration hell. If we want to add, you know, Jira tickets or whatever other backlog system people are using, we need to write a whole separate integration piece for each of those backends. But if we're able to sort of just have a single dynamic MCP config for each Yak Shaver customer, they could say, all right, I use Jira, so I'm going to put in the Jira MCP server, and then I'm just going to have a prompt that says, you know, here's a transcript of an issue, please create a Jira ticket. And that's all you have to do. And then the Jira MCP server would handle all the hard work of integrating for both us and for the client. So that's sort of the direction we're moving with SSW products. So just to wrap up the whole talk tonight, I hope everyone is going to go home after this and create a custom MCP server, or if not, at least look at some MCP servers and think about what could I be doing, and then use MCP for your next integration. Think about what do you do in your day-to-day life or your work or whatever that touches a bunch of different systems. How could you use MCP to solve it, and solve it, basically. Use the idea of TeloScript for orchestration. So if you're writing a tool that integrates with other systems, I'm not expecting you to, you know, take a dependency on the TeloScript repository or anything like that, but use the idea of creating a custom MCP host. Feel free to go to the repo, see how it works. Take that idea and use it for your next integration. That's probably what we'll end up doing in Yakshaver and in Eagle Eye and anywhere else where we want to do similar things. Make sure you maintain an AI surplus. So produce AI content for yourself. Put a tariff on imported AI content. Borrow tech debt today, pay it off with inflated AI effort of tomorrow. And most importantly, persevere. Thank you. And yeah, so you can scan that QR code if you want to give feedback. If you download the SSW app at the start, when you fill in the feedback, you'll get 1,000 SSW points.
That was really awesome. Good job.
No worries. Thank you.
So guys, this is a talk that I've been looking forward to for a long time. I don't come to all the user groups, but I always come to Calum's. And yeah, look, we're getting a lot of kind of really cutting edge information from someone who looks into this all day, every day, all night, all weekend. So this is really good. But yeah, has anyone got any questions for Calum?
If you're online and you've got a question, feel free to pop it in the chat as well. I'm looking at that too. Any questions here? Yes. Oh, sorry, we need a microphone for you so the audience can hear too.
I think it's just for the online.
Yeah, it won't amplify your voice.
Okay, does MCP server has issues with choosing from tool when you have a bunch of MCP servers?
Yes, that is a good point. So if you're providing too many MCP tools to the MCP host, you can get overwhelmed with too many things, too many different tools it can use, and it can be sometimes difficult for it to select the correct tool. I think there are definitely solutions for this. For example, you could have sort of like if you're building a custom MCP host, you could be controlling which tools you make available to the LLM based on the request. So if you could have basically a bit of middleware that intercepts the request, based on the request determines which tools it thinks should be available, and then only passes that subset of all your tools to the LLM to actually use the tool. So I think tools like that, they're not widespread at the moment, but there's no reason why they won't be implemented, and I'm sure they will be when people start using this more. Does that make sense?
So if servers, so when you say tools, you mean different servers?
Well, one server can have many tools. So each server has many tools. So basically what we can do is just have an extra step to filter out irrelevant tools, as Jack just said in the live chat. So you can basically filter out the tools that aren't relevant for the current request, only provide the relevant tools, and then it's got a much shorter list of options to pick from.
So it can be different tools from different servers?
It can be, yes, absolutely. That's what I demoed when I showed the GitHub vector issue search. So it was using the vector issue search along with the regular GitHub MCP server. You could use them both at the same time, interchangeably. Any other questions?
I've got a few.
Okay.
So first thing is I'm kind of more in the ChatGPT ecosystem than the Claude ecosystem. Can I use ChatGPT desktop like you use in Claude desktop? Or if not, will I be able to soon?
Good question. I'm not sure. I personally have not used ChatGPT desktop with MCP. Last time I checked, it didn't have it. I'm not sure if it's on the roadmap. But last time I checked, it did not have it. I'm not sure if they're planning to do it or not. Good question. With a paid subscription?
For enterprise, for sure.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. But it doesn't seem to have happened yet.
Yeah, he did tweet it, but last time I checked, maybe with the enterprise. I'm not paying for that, so I don't have it.
So a similar question is, I'm using custom GPTs a lot.
Yep.
They have API integration, but will they have MCP integrations at some point as well?
That's another good question. I've got no idea. They should, and there's no reason why they couldn't. It would just be up to OpenAI if they want to implement it or not.
Yeah, fair enough. I guess Anthropic's spearheading it because it was their
Exactly.
their invention. Okay, cool. So MCP servers auto update with new functionality. Can you lock down some functionality? So if you have an application that's wrapped in an MCP server, but you only want some of your application's functionality to be exposed, is that a thing?
Well, if you're controlling the MCP server, then yeah, it's totally up to you.
So the reason I'm confused about that is because I know you don't explicitly say, this functionality people can use and this they can't. It just auto updates as you build new stuff. It auto exposes that to the MCP server.
No. As the person who implements the MCP server, you have control over what you expose as a tool. But the point about automatically updating is if you are using an MCP tool and that tool is updated with, MCP server. If you're using an MCP server and the MCP server is updated with a new tool, you as a user will automatically get that new tool. You don't need to do anything on your end to update your integration to use it. But it's not that the server itself is going to automatically expose every piece of functionality as the app
Right.
gets
So if
updated.
you wrapped Yakshaver in an MCP server and then you came up with new functionality in Yakshaver, you'd still have to do some configuration
You
to
would,
the MCP
but
server to give
critically, you'd only have to do it once in the MCP server.
And
then
everyone
everyone
would.
who uses
That
it
makes
would
sense.
get it.
Ah,
Yeah.
cool. When you were using TeloScript,
Yes.
you ticked each time you ticked the MCP servers you wanted it to use.
Yes.
If you didn't tick any, or could you set it up so that it automatically just figures it out itself?
You could.
But you, like you were saying, you wanted to make sure it was explicit.
That's
use
right.
these
But
tools.
yeah, if I wanted to, and that might be something that I ask a cursor background agent to do tonight, is make it so that if you don't tell it which MCP servers to use, it could dynamically suggest which servers to use out of your entire list based on the request.
Right.
There's no reason why you couldn't do that.
Okay, cool. My last question was, as a non-dev,
Yeah.
how can I interact with or take advantage of MCP servers? Because I've made custom GPTs,
Yep.
but can I make something or use something to use an MCP server?
Absolutely. So there are, I showed a bunch of MCP hosts that exist at the moment.
Yeah.
Claude Desktop, I've seen you use Claude Desktop recently. That's a sort of a cool beginner's MCP host that's very easy to use. Claude Code is another one that I use a lot. But yeah, that would be my recommendation to get started.
So it's pretty straightforward, like a non-dev could do it.
Yeah, absolutely. All you need to do, the hardest part is you need to copy paste some JSON.
Could probably handle that.
You should be able to handle that, hopefully. Yeah.
Excellent. Any other questions here, guys? Any online?
Jake, did you have a question?
Sure. Where can we find existing MCP servers? I know you showed
Modelscope.cn. Yep.
That's a bunch of Chinese ones.
They're not Chinese ones. They're from all over the world. It's sort of a list of global MCP servers, not just Chinese MCP servers.
Right.
So they do have some Chinese MCP servers, being a Chinese resource, but they've also got all the Western ones as well. Obviously, if you just Google MCP servers, you'll probably find a bunch as well. Yeah, but that was just my, the reason why I called it out in my talk was because I think not many people even know it exists, but I think it's a really awesome resource. So I think it's worth just calling out. That's all. Any other questions in here? There are some questions online. Is there any way to, Gilles from France says, is there any way to put some kind of a weight for each MCP while many MCP are involved? Good question. I guess what you're saying is you wanted to suggest some MCP servers are right for the task, so you want to weight them more heavily than others. The answer is not really. I guess you could order them. Maybe the LLM is going to give more precedence to the one at the top of the order, but there's nothing defined in the protocol about doing that. So not really is the answer. Although, as I said before, you can filter out MCP servers that you don't want to use for a specific request if you want. So I guess that's the best you can do. And Jeffrey says, is AI going to replace my job? No comment. No comment.
Yes, for Jeffrey, for you specifically, yes.
Yeah,
Probably.
for Jeffrey.
But in general, people will be okay.
Everyone else is fine.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I guess if that's all the questions, we'll leave it there. Oh, another question out the back. A late entry.
It's just for the online audience.
Just speak loudly.
So some of the questions I would like to ask is that how to use AI to improve development and using what kind of AI to assist development. Of course, maybe you are not using just like ChatGPT or maybe you use other tools.
Yep.
And if you want to import a project just like about 1,000 files, a lot of files into the AI, you will need to import the files one by one for 1,000 times, which is too troublesome. So how to import a project of a lot of files into the AI?
Right, yeah, so what you're talking about there is sort of using AI to assist with development. If you've got, obviously a big project with a lot of different files, it doesn't really make sense to copy paste those files one by one into ChatGPT. So what you can do for that, Cursor, I don't know if you've heard of Cursor, VS Code with GitHub Copilot, Claude Code, Gemini CLI, there's a whole bunch of developer tools available. Windsurf is another one. A whole bunch of different tools available that basically take the context of your project, just like VS Code. So, you've got a window with all the different files here, but when you chat to the AI chatbot that's embedded, it can reference all those files in your project for you. So you don't have to do any of the copy pasting to different places. Actually, I can show you what that looks like. So here I've got, this is the TeloScript repository. I hope it's big enough. I'll zoom in a bit. Oh, it's not zooming, is it? There we go. So what I can do here is I can open up Claude Code and do that. And so what I can do here is I can actually chat with AI with the context of my my code base without having to copy paste anything out of here and into ChatGPT. So I could say, for example, what is this repo all about? Okay, and then it's going to be thinking about what the repo is about. Yep, does some cool stuff like that, and it's using tools like reading files. So I don't have to copy paste anything, right? It's all happening within the context of this terminal window. It's reading different files, it's thinking, and it's giving me an answer. So this is TeloScript, a sophisticated agent orchestration platform that coordinates MCP, blah, blah, blah. So that's what you can sort of do. And then I could also ask it to edit files or perform an action, and it can do that just as easily as well. So I don't need to write code in ChatGPT and copy it back in here. I can just do it all through here within the context of the project. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Any other questions?
Of those tools you just mentioned, Cursor, Windsurf, Sweet Agents or whatever, and GitHub Copilot, do you have what do you mainly use yourself nowadays?
I use a mix of Claude Code and Cursor. I was a really, really big fan of Cursor, and I still am. I say was, but I'm finding Claude Code is getting better and better, and I am using it a lot more often.
More MCP support?
Yeah, more MCP support, and it's just a better user experience overall. Plus the fact that I can use Kimi K2 with it, which is currently my favorite model, which I can't use in Cursor. I think you can use it if you set up, if you do it through Open Router or something like that, but I haven't got around to that yet.
It came out this week, so
yeah,
hopefully soon.
Hopefully soon. But one thing that Cursor is still really good at is background agents. So that's something where I can actually, on my phone, I can sort of tell Cursor, hey, add this feature to TeloScript for me while I'm out to dinner or whatever. And then when I get home, it has prepared a pull request for me. I can review it later. So the fact that I can do that on my phone is really awesome. So I can always be adding new features and stuff like that.
Can you hook that up with Siri?
Maybe, I don't know. I haven't tried.
And you get Jarvis. Nice.
Yes, another question. Just wait for the microphone.
Because you guys write a lot of enterprise code stuff. So I also come from the background of monorepos and all this stuff. But what we incredibly face difficulty even with this contextual thing, like using Claude Code is as well, like there are like 40 applications in the same code base. And it's like there is a lot of dependency between a lot of these packages and all this stuff. So I still don't get, like, let's say that if a developer is trying to change something, that like they're trying to use this Copilot and all this stuff, but they're not getting the full context of what is breaking between this stuff, between this, let's say there are 10 applications that are breaking. If you do this particular change, you shouldn't be doing this. Like, how can we get this very deep dive context, especially in a very, like a big modular code basis?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think there's sort of a couple of things to think about with that. Firstly, the context window of models is rapidly expanding. So back in the old days, there used to be like 4,000 tokens per request. So you couldn't even send in a single entire file to get a response in some cases. Now, with maybe a moderately sized repo, you've got no trouble. Only with a really massive one do you have trouble. So I think the way things are trending, eventually, the context windows will get large enough that it no longer becomes a problem by itself. But I think also, if you're trying to use these AI code tools and you're having trouble, most of them provide the capability to sort of add additional context or prompts to try and sort of steer it in the right way. So you can also sort of almost write a sort of a README or instruction file so that when it's trying to do something, it can refer to that first to say, okay, in this directory here, we've got this set of things. And if you do it like that, then every time you send a new request, it doesn't have to start from zero. It can already read that file, get a bunch of context about what's going on in all these different places, and then use that knowledge to help guide what it's trying to do. So you might find some
I could really see the difference when I'm querying it in the GitHub Copilot's Claude Sonnet versus the direct Claude Sonnet. If I am running the same query on the direct Claude window on the Claude console, it gives me a very better answer compared to running the same query in a GitHub Copilot subscriptions Claude Sonnet. It's because of the context length might be. Yeah,
interesting.
Probably.
Another option is you can now run deep research on your actual code base itself to figure out all the dependencies and all the things that are going to be needed as context for it to do its work. So deep research now can not just search the internet, it can also search within, for instance, a code repository.
What is it called?
Deep research, yeah. And most of the major suppliers have a deep research functionality now.
I guess like you could probably create, like for each application that you have in your code base, like create a custom MCP that will have knowledge of the code and then let them all talk together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You could create an MCP server.
So like you have expert of a specific application,
assist with explaining issues.
Intermediate agent kind of thing that can actually interact with all.
Absolutely. There's no reason why you couldn't do that. Yep.
Which is probably what they'll end up doing themselves eventually anyway.
Probably. Any other questions?
That's great. Guys, Calum,
Awesome.
very, very much. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.